Okay, folks, I've got a couple minutes past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry, I see just a question that just came in. Is the first class still available on Zoom? So tonight is actually a repeat of the class we did this morning. So if anybody that's here happened to join us this morning as well, we're going to be going over the same content today. And I've got a couple more things to mention here from a housekeeping standpoint that we'll get to as well that I think will be useful. So okay, well, thanks folks for being here. We're super excited to have you join us to talk about some online privacy and safety tips today. My name is Connor, and joining me today and our presenter for today is Doug Crawford. Doug has been a member of the DirectLink data operations team for over 15 years now, and he really knows his stuff. So we're super thankful and super excited to have Doug teach this class for us today. We're going to learn some really helpful tidbits. Just a couple of housekeeping items. You may have seen that we are recording the session tonight, and this class recording will be available to watch on our website at directlink.coop/classes within the next week. So if you see any tidbits you want to kind of see again, or maybe take some notes again through a second time, you can go back and watch the recording of this class at this website right here. And everybody that's in this class right now, you'll also get another email about a week from now that'll just give you a little reminder and then a link where you can go watch that recording as well if you would like to. So today we're going to be using the chat button to ask any questions or leave any comments that you might have. And the chat bubble looks just like this in that red circle on the screen. If you don't see it right now, and you're on a laptop or a desktop computer, just hover your mouse kind of over the screen and you should see a toolbar pop up from either the top or the bottom of the screen. And if you're on a tablet or a smartphone, you can just tap your finger anywhere on the screen and that toolbar should pop up where you can click into the chat. So please, if you have any questions or any comments about any of the content that we go over tonight, type it into the chat and we will do our best to answer it. So this class is kind of the next step to the community class that we did at the end of March. That was our first class, 5 ways to protect personal information online. Doug, I think we have that dialog box in the screen. Thank you. And thanks everybody for your understanding as we navigate the different Zoom controls and things like that to allow us to do this remotely. So in our first online safety best practices class that we had earlier this year, we talked about several key ways that you can stay safe online, things that you can watch out for and things that you can do. I just want to invite you to watch the recording of that class if you would like some more information on some of those tips and tricks if you didn't make that class. But we'll just go over real briefly some of those main takeaways from that class. So one of the main things we can do to stay safe online is to watch out for phishing scams. These are very prevalent and you've probably received at least one of these at some point. These are either emails or text messages that seem a little bit fishy, right? They seem like they're from a legitimate company or organization, but they want you to click on a button or click on a link somewhere in the email in order to update your password or your username or confirm your credit card details, something along those lines. And these are always scams. The goal is to get you to click on that button and then either infect your computer with some sort of malware or a virus or get you to give up your personal information. So watch out for these. These are usually always scams. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Another thing we can do to really lock down our online safety is to create strong and unique passwords for every account that we have. Again, there's way more details on how to do this in the previous community class that we did. And then once you've got all those strong, unique passwords, locking down all your accounts, how do you remember all of them, right? You actually can utilize a password manager to store those login credentials. Think of this like an online vault or a safe where all your passwords are safely tucked away inside that vault, and then only you can access them and use them to log into your accounts. So those are just a couple of the main things that we went over in that last community class. So I invite you to watch that recording on our website as well if you want some more information. But today, we are going to dive a little bit deeper into some more things that you can do to best protect your online safety and privacy. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give it up to Doug. So give it away. Or here we go, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. I do want to take just a second and acknowledge that while I may be presenting this class, full credit goes to Connor for organizing this and putting all the content together. So thank you for all the work that you've done with that, Connor. And with that said, let's jump into things. So it used to be about 20 years ago, you just renew your Norton antivirus subscription for the year and you were good. You were safe. Your computer was covered. And for the most part, you really didn't have to worry too much about any threats. As most of you know, times have kind of changed. Now the threat vector is much broader. There's multiple areas that people can attack or invade your privacy online. One of the things that I've been told, and this is actually a quote from my boss, so I'll give full credit to him. If a product is free, like something you use online is free, you are the product. So it's interesting to think like the services that we get from sites such as Google, such as Facebook, the product is actually us. It's the data that they collect that they're able to resell to other vendors, marketing companies. And I'm sure a lot of you have noticed at times, like maybe you mention something within the vicinity of your phone, or you search for something online, and for about the next week, you're getting ads like related to that random keyword that you searched for. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight, is how to protect your privacy when it comes to stuff like that. So we will be covering knowing how and why your online activity is tracked. So why do they care and how do they get that information about you? How to adjust your device and browser privacy settings. So we'll talk about how to adjust settings on browser for a desktop computer, as well as app permissions on mobile devices. We'll also cover some extra stuff. If the built-in settings aren't enough for your comfort level, we'll cover some extra tools that you might be able to use to reach a level of privacy that you feel more comfortable with. And then we'll also talk about the importance of keeping software up to date on your devices, your browser, your operating system, any apps or programs that you might be using. And then finally, probably I think the most significant step is just being aware of where you are. Being sure that the links that you're clicking on are legitimate, the sites you're going to are legitimate. There's some dark stuff out there online, and not all of it is good. There's some pretty malicious sites. So you want to be aware of where you're at. And if you do accidentally click a link that you're not supposed to go to, don't worry, don't panic. In the worst case scenarios, we have some built-in protection as an ISP, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we started off talking about how companies track you. And the question, well, why are they tracking you? Well, the answer is money. That's money. That's what it comes down to. Okay, but how? The most common thing that they'll do is they'll track information about you through cookies. So what is a cookie? I'm sure most of you have probably heard the term, but let's discuss what that actually means. So a cookie is a small piece of data. It's like a file that's exchanged between your client, the host website, and your client computer. So when you go to a website, let's say you have to log in. Maybe it's a site like Facebook. So you log in. A small file is exchanged between Facebook and your computer saying this person has logged in, they've authenticated. And that is a cookie. It's that piece of information is the cookie. Now, cookies can be perfectly useful things, like in the example I just said. Say you're on Facebook and you click a link to go look at something else on Facebook. It doesn't make you log in again because it has that cookie that says this person's already authenticated, they're good to go. Cookies can make sites useful. They definitely add to the functionality of websites, but they can also be a bit intrusive. So some of the things they might save about you would be like your location, your IP address, maybe different ads that you've clicked on, maybe different history that you have on that site. These are things that we might not be interested in letting that site know about. And when it comes to the privacy aspect of being online, cookies really are the big thing that you want to be aware of. So what do we do about it? How can we limit the number of cookies that sites are able to collect about us? How can we limit the data that they're collecting? If you're on a desktop computer using a browser, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to look for the three dots. So if you use Chrome or if you use Firefox, actually, Connor, should we do that poll?
Yeah, let's see which browser folks are using. So you're gonna see a poll pop up on your screen right now. Just gonna ask you which browser you use, and then this will give us a little bit of an idea of which one we can talk about. So thank you. I see some. Okay, that's what I expected. Give it a couple more seconds. Perfect. Yep. Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
All right, let's share the results here so that folks can see. So we got a good amount of folks that are using Google Chrome, and this is fair. A lot of folks use Google Chrome as one of the most popular browsers.
So I can certainly relate to that. Chrome is definitely my favorite browser. Edge doesn't get the love that I think it should deserve. In fact, a lot of people don't realize Microsoft Edge is Google Chrome. It's built on the Chromium architecture, but it's essentially the same thing. A little surprised there's no love for Firefox. Usually that gets a little bit of attention, but I am definitely happy to see that nobody marked I'm not sure. So good to know that you know what browser you're using. So let's take a look at Chrome. Up in the corner, we have the three dots. If we click on the three dots, one of the options in the drop-down there will be settings. And if we go into settings, you'll see that there's this section over here called privacy and security. Under privacy and security, it gives us different options that we can enable or disable or fine-tune regarding the privacy settings and regarding cookies and site data. Now, I do want to just pause right here and take a sec to say, depending on what browser you're using, this might be worded differently. The privacy and security section will always be in the settings menu, but sometimes it might be referred to as something else. However, all browsers give you some level of control over this. And so all browsers should have the same functionality as far as what you can do to limit your cookies. But in this example, most of us use Chrome. So let's just take a look at Chrome. One of the things we can do here is we can clear browsing data, which you'll notice clears the history, cookies, cache, and more. We can go into cookies and other site data, and you'll notice it gives us options. We can allow all cookies, which I don't recommend. We can block third-party cookies in incognito. Now that would only apply if we're using an incognito window, which in this case we are not. So let's take a look below that. We have block third-party cookies, and you'll notice this is checked right now. What that does, there's first-party cookies, which are the cookies from the website itself. Those cookies are usually integral to the functioning of the website. The third-party cookies are the ones that are on there for advertising tracking purposes. Those are the ones that are a little bit more intrusive, and those are the ones that Well, in general, those are the ones you want to block. My recommendation is if you go into your browser settings, I highly recommend blocking third-party cookies. Now, I don't recommend blocking all cookies, which is this next option here, uh, because that really restricts the functionality of some websites. However, if you want to be extra secure, extra cautious, the option does exist there. Um, You'll also notice there's a setting here. It says clear cookies and site data when you close all windows. This isn't a bad idea. What that'll do is that will clear out all of the information and history, but it can also be a bit annoying. So if you sign into a website, you close the window, you remember 2 seconds later, oh, wait, I forgot to do that one thing. You go to open it back up. It's going to force you to sign back in. It's going to force you to navigate back to where you were. So it can be a little bit annoying, but it is more secure to have stuff cleared as soon as you close the window. We also want to take a look at this. Send a do not track request with your browsing traffic. The key word there, request. It doesn't necessarily have to be honored by the website. Reputable sites will honor that, and they won't track your information. They won't track your location data. Less reputable sites don't have to honor that. They will ignore it, and they'll continue to track whatever they feel like tracking, unless you block the third-party cookies. Those are really the main ones that I want you to take away from this. Specifically, this right here, I highly recommend. If you're concerned about your online privacy, this is a good place to start. Block third-party cookies. There's really not much reason to allow those. Now let's jump back over. But not all of us use desktop computers. Most of us use our phones. I couldn't help. I told Connor to put in the Lionel Richie picture there. Hello. So what do we do about privacy and security on the phones? Well, if you use an iPhone, you can go into your settings and there is a section for privacy and security. And you'll notice in this section, you have location services. You can turn those on or off just as a default setting on the phone. Likewise, you have some control over the built-in content, such as contacts, calendars, photos, Bluetooth. But you'll also see a list of the different apps that are on the phone. And that's where you can go in and you can start looking at more granular controls over what you want to allow those specific apps to do, what permissions you want to give them. So as an example, Amazon in this screenshot wants to have access to the camera, your Face ID, your cellular data, and it wants to be able to do background refreshing. Now, some of these we look at and you think, well, why does Amazon need access to my camera? You know, that seems pretty suspect. But there are legitimate reasons why an app might need or might request information to that. So as an example, with Amazon, let's say you just bought something, you're uploading a review to Amazon, and you want to include a picture of the thing that you reviewed. So you say, I'm going to attach a picture. In order to do that, the app will need access to the camera feature of your phone. As another example, you maybe bought some furniture or you're thinking about buying furniture. It will have an option to see how this looks in your home, where it will take the camera and you can scan around your room and it will superimpose the furniture over the location that you're thinking about putting it. And there are legitimate, useful reasons for why some of these apps might want some of these features. But it all comes down to your comfort level. So if you don't want Amazon to control your camera, you do have the option to say, no, you're not allowed to access that, and you can toggle that off. Now, I also want to point out another instance over here, Facebook. You'll notice that the location for Facebook has the option while using. Some apps will give you options to allow permissions only when you're using the app. So that is to say, you can set it to never, or you can set it to always allow, or you can set it to only when the app is open. Now, in this specific instance, Facebook wants to know your location while you're using the Facebook app. Okay, that might be helpful if you want people to know where you're at. Maybe you're live streaming from a park or something, and you want people to know, hey, I'm over at this park. That location data can be sent through Facebook and it can be updated. What you might not want, and what I kind of recommend, is I would not let Facebook specifically, I wouldn't let most apps gather that information and have permissions to not just location, but frankly, anything while it's not in use. There's really not much reason that an app that's not being used should need to know your location data. With I will offer a caveat, an exemption, if you will. My family uses the Life 360 app to kind of track each other and know that, oh, we made it to our destination safely, so we don't have to get paranoid and call each other. That would be an example. I don't mind Life 360 knowing my location. Now, that said, I do know how to go in through the permissions and disable that should I ever have a scenario where, you know what, I just want to go off the grid for a little bit. I know how to tell Life 360 stop. But for the most part, I just want it to do its thing in the background. So if my mom needs to know that I got home from work, okay, fine. The information's there. It should update. So the main thing I want to point out with this is you have these controls. Should you enable stuff? It depends on your comfort level. Some things like location data, I would only allow while using the app for most apps, with rare exceptions. Other things, microphone could be useful. So I mentioned microphone as one. Another app that I have on my phone is the Alexa app. And yeah, I have a smart home setup. When I come in and I want to tell my phone, hey, turn on the lights, I don't want to have to pause, go into my settings, enable permissions, enable the microphone app, and then say, okay, Alexa, turn on the lights. I just let it do it in the background. So anytime we're talking privacy and security, really it does come down to convenience versus security. And you really have to find the balance that works for your comfort level as far as what you want to allow. But just know the options are there, the controls are there. So if you're not comfortable with something, you can go in and shut it down. For the Android users out there, I'll be frank, yours might not look like this. Android has a lot of different flavors, and the operating system can look different depending on what you're using, but it is there. You might have to look for it in slightly different ways. It might not look exactly like this, but if you go into the settings, you will have privacy and security, but privacy is where you're going to get the permission manager, which will go in and let you control the features of the apps, just like we saw with the iOS screen. So it'll look a little different, but it is there. So you should be able to find it if you just look around a little. If the built-in features are not enough for you, know that there are some third-party things that we can take a look at. We're going to talk briefly about a program that I like called Malware, which will help you scan for any potential infections on your system. We're going to talk about ad blockers, why you might want to use those. And then we'll talk about network traffic encryptors, which is a very fancy term that we'll talk about in just a sec. But let's start with Malware. So the first thing that I want you to know about Malware, it's free. That's the main thing that I really like about Malwarebytes. I've used Malwarebytes quite a lot. I've cleaned up systems with it. I've run it on my own system. I've used it at times where maybe I suspect that a system might be infected and I just kind of want to confirm that everything's okay. The next thing that I want you to know, it does not cost money. And then the third thing, and probably maybe the most important point about Malwarebytes, is it's very affordable. So highly recommend Malwarebytes. It can be downloaded at malwarebytes.org. Now they do offer a paid version, corporate license, which I believe will let you install it on up to 200 machines. For home use, you don't need that. It's part of their license agreement that if you're only using it for home use, there is no charge. If you get the paid version, there's a little bit more granular control of it, but honestly, it's probably not something that you need to pay for. And if you're curious, it is available on mobile as well in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. So Malwarebytes, if you suspect that your system has been infected, maybe you accidentally clicked on a link, maybe you went to a website and I've got a voice screaming at me saying your system is infected with a virus. What I would recommend is go ahead and download Malwarebytes, give it a scan, see what it comes back with. If it finds anything malicious, it'll do one of two things. Either one, it will delete the infection outright, or two, it will quarantine it, it will set it aside, and just make sure that it can't interface with anything else on the system that might cause problems. Now, I also want to pause for a second here because I did hammer in the fact that Malwarebytes is free. And for those of you paying attention at the very start, I talked about if a product is free, you're the product. So that might be a little bit suspicious. But in this instance, the information that Malwarebytes wants to collect is it wants to collect more data about strings of code. So it's looking to better refine its definitions of what it considers malicious software. It's not out to get private information about you. It's looking for information about malicious code. So in this instance, yes, you're the product, but it's probably a product I think most of us would be comfortable letting Malwarebytes have. So other than Malwarebytes, let's talk about ad blockers. I use an ad blocker extension. The specific one I use is AdBlock Plus. I use that on, let's see, 3 of my computers, 2 of the browsers on all 3 of my computers. Highly recommend it. I really do. Other people that I know use uBlock Origin, and that one comes highly recommended too. What that'll do is it will stop ads from running on a given page. So it'll block a lot of the third-party content that comes up. Now, specifically for me, where I really, really appreciate having an ad blocker is when I watch a YouTube video, I don't have to sit through a 10-second unskippable ad. I'm able to just jump right into the video, which is a very nice feeling. And likewise, uBlock Origin would do the same as AdBlock Plus. The other notable thing is, have you ever been on a page where you load the page, maybe you start scrolling down and ads start loading in and the page is just slow to respond to everything. Maybe you go to click a link on something and right as you're about to click the link, an ad pops in right there and you accidentally click on the ad and you have to hit the back button and then you have to get back to where you were. It's kind of a pain. Using an ad blocker, 1, eliminates all the frustration of that, and 2, could actually speed up the loading of the page. Now, I also want to touch on a story. This was a while back, probably about 15 years ago. There was a hacker out of Russia, kind of got a little bit famous in the IT world. He pulled off a rather brilliant hack. What he would do is he went and he had a malicious code that he embedded in legitimate ads, legitimate looking ads. that he then went and sold to, or bought ad space from legitimate websites. So you would go to a legitimate website and what looked like a legitimate ad would load. But what you didn't realize is that ad would run a script in the background. And that script would look for outdated versions of Java on your system. His specific one looked for an outdated version of Java that it could then use to run an exploit, which would install some software on the back end of your system without you noticing, without anything obvious coming up. And what that would do is it would allow him at a future point to take over your computer and use it as what's part of what's known as a botnet, where he could control hundreds, thousands of computers, which that becomes especially powerful if you have thousands of computers. You can direct all of those to a single site, sending queries to certain servers or databases, and you can take them down. You could knock down significant chunks of the internet if you control a big enough botnet. And his was very successful. Had those people been running ad blockers, that would have stopped it in its tracks. The ad would fail to load, system would not be infected. So ad blockers are not just good at stopping annoyances, but they do provide a layer of security that you might not even be thinking about. The other one I want to touch on is a VPN. So what is a VPN? I'm sure most of us have heard the term, but do we know what VPN stands for? Is VPN a very pretty narwhal? Does VPN stand for very punctual nanny? Does it stand for visually pleasing nanobot? Or is it virtual private network? It's virtual private network. That's kind of the lamest of the answers, but that's the accurate one. So a virtual private network, what does it do? What it does is it encrypts the data between a client and a host. So the client is your computer. It would encrypt the data from your computer to the VPN server. Now, commercial VPNs, a couple of popular examples would be NordVPN or ExpressVPN. You've probably heard some advertisements for these across the internet. If you have a VPN with either of those, it would encrypt the data from your computer up to their server. This also allows you to mask your location because it would then make it look like any requests would be coming from their server. So if you go out to a website, say you do a Google search, if you have your VPN connected, Google will think that that request is coming from the NordVPN server, not your computer. VPNs are probably most commonly used for business applications. And that definitely makes sense. If business has an internal network that they want to restrict access to, they might make it so that the only way you can get into that internal network is through a virtual private network. But I want to go back just a sec, because I mentioned that a VPN encrypts data. What does that mean? So when we talk about encrypting data, basically it's scrambling that data. So if you do a Google search, that search query will be sent to the Google servers as encrypted data. It will, anybody trying to observe from a third party trying to access that information, they might see your request, but they won't be able to understand what it says. It's encoded. But you probably don't need a VPN. At least not for that purpose anyway. The fact that it's encoded sounds really secure. Most of us have seen a web address before, though. If you look at the very first part of it, https://www, whatever the site is. The S in the HTTPS stands for secure. And this has actually become a standard across the internet. It's hard to find a site that doesn't have that S in it. Now, what that security means is it's already encrypting information between your browser and the site that you're going to. So those Google requests, they don't need to go through a VPN to be encrypted. They're already encrypted. So for a lot of common applications, you don't need a NordVPN or an ExpressVPN to be secure. Now, you might still want it. One of the other things that I talked about is it allows you to mask your location. The most useful thing that I find with commercial grade VPNs such as Nord or Express is it will let you change your location, which allows you to get around regional content blocking through services like Netflix. So say you want to watch a show on Netflix, but it's not available in your area. It's only available in Australia. Fire up your VPN, change your location to Australia. Suddenly, you're a Netflix user in Australia. You can watch any content that's available there. Not necessarily the most security-driven application of using a VPN, but definitely useful and definitely something you should know about if that sort of thing interests you. But when it comes to privacy and security, do you need a VPN subscription? No, you probably don't. You're probably okay without one. If you decide that for your own comfort level, you do want one, be sure to use offer code Connor and Doug to get 20% off a 2-year subscription with NordVPN. No, that's just a joke. We don't actually have an offer code with them, but we're looking for sponsorship. Now, another thing that we talked about earlier, we mentioned, and something that is very significant, very important, keeping your device's software up to date. So hackers will look for exploits in code. What does that mean? Well, they'll look for ways that they can trick the code into running something that it wasn't designed to do. Developers will develop patches. So if a hacker finds a way to exploit a piece of software and a developer becomes aware of it, they'll go back and they'll patch that exploit to make it impossible for the hacker to get in there. And they'll send out that patch via an update. That's why we want to update our software. That's why it's always a good idea. It's never a bad idea to update. If you ever see that little pop-up window saying, hey, Windows has an update, click here to restart your machine, don't ignore it. Don't keep pushing it off indefinitely. I know sometimes it might not be the most convenient thing to do it right when you see it, but it is good. It is important to run those updates and keep things up to date. In the case of mobile devices, you might have some criteria that you have to meet before a device can update. Also, just as a side note, enable automatic updates. It's not a bad idea. For apps, for operating system, allow it to automatically update. Now, as I was saying on a phone, typically you'll have to meet a couple of different criteria. You'll have to be on Wi-Fi. It won't try and update over a mobile network because frankly, sometimes the size of the updates could run through all of your monthly data. So it'll do it over Wi-Fi, but not your metered connection. It'll also require you to have the device plugged in, and that's so that the battery doesn't die as it's trying to update the software. Believe me, if that happens, bad things can happen. It could turn your phone into a lovely paperweight. So it knows that risk exists and therefore won't even attempt to update until those certain criteria are met. As far as the desktop computer goes, you might be able to go in and set a period of time to allow it to automatically update. Like in Windows, I've got mine set to automatically update every night if it finds an update between midnight and 6 a.m. because those are the hours where I know I'm really not going to be using my computer. So I say, Windows, go ahead, do your thing. If you think you need to update and restart, go ahead, do it. You don't have to ask. I do want to go back to the story that I was talking about with the Russian hacker and how he ran the ads on the legitimate websites and they would exploit old versions of Java. In this instance, If Java had been updated, that also would have shut down that hack. So a couple of different ways that if people had taken some protections, either blocking the ads in the first place, or if they had just kept the software on their systems up to date, it would have shut all of that down. They wouldn't have been infected. Their device would have been fine. So updates might be annoying at times, but they are important, and it is good to keep everything up to date as possible. And then one of the last things we mentioned, knowing where you are online. And I talked about this earlier. There's certain links that, maybe a site is intentionally misleading. It wants you to go to Facebook, but Facebook has 2 Ks at the end. Or there's a slight misspelling, or maybe a search result that comes up that takes you somewhere not quite where you were intending to go. It's important to try and catch that stuff before you accidentally go to a site that you don't want to be at. I talked about the S in the HTTPS. That's usually a good sign of the legitimacy of a website. If you notice there's no S there, you might want to think about it before you click on that link. Some websites can and will infect your computer with malicious software if you just visit them. Some of them will try and collect information. They're called phishing sites. Some of them will be really deceptive. Like, they'll look like a login page for a popular website, but they're not. And if you try and log in there, you're essentially giving a malicious site your login information. So these sites are known, not all of them, but the worst offenders, the worst of the worst offenders, are known about. And we use a service called Cisco Umbrella. What Cisco Umbrella does is it keeps a blacklist of the worst of these sites, and it stops you from going there. So if your browser tries to access a site that Cisco Umbrella knows about and says, whoa, this is a bad site, you really don't want to go here, instead of going to the site, you'll actually be redirected to a page that says, hey, we blocked this site from loading. Like, you don't want to go here. It's bad. As an ISP, we have Cisco Umbrella enabled for all of our members. If you don't want this, you are allowed to opt out of it. You can contact our member services, and we can opt you out of the Cisco Umbrella defense. However, it is generally just a good thing. Just let it run in the background. You'll really not notice it. It doesn't slow anything down, doesn't cause any issues with the general browsing experience. What it is it's really a safety net. So if you do accidentally click on a link that you shouldn't have, instead of taking you to a site that will almost certainly cause issues with your computer, you'll be blocked. You'll be saved from having that unfortunate experience. But with that, that concludes the 5 points that we were going to go over tonight. If you do have anything that maybe you want some more in-depth discussion of, by all means, you're welcome to contact our tech support. They're very good at explaining these sorts of things. Or if you feel like it's enough content, you want its own class, Connor is more than welcome to take suggestions for future classes. But with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Connor. Feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Doug. We really appreciate your knowledge and sharing all these tips with us. As Doug mentioned, please, if you have any additional questions or comments or ideas for future classes that you'd like to see us put on, you can drop us an email at hereforyou@directlink.coop. Please save the date for our next community class. That's going to be on Thursday, December 1st. We're hammering out the details, but you can expect to see some emails and other announcements from us on that. All right, everybody. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, giving us some of your time to talk about some internet privacy and safety tips and tricks. Really appreciate Doug for lending us his time and expertise in this area tonight. And again, save the date for our next community class on Thursday, December 1st. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the night.